finally, but certainly not in the last place, James Ryan of AstraZeneca, head of your company's HTA team and vice chair of the EFPIA HTA working group. The microphone is yours.
Thank you ever so much, and great to be here to provide a health technology developer perspective. This will be partly our perspective, but mainly from an industry side. And I wanted to just sort of talk around 5 key themes, because I've been asked about what is our experience, what have been some of our insights, where can we all work together in the spirit of building this and realising the opportunity that the HTA regulation gives, and also thinking a bit to the future around the metrics there. So we've heard today, and certainly from Alexander as well, from a company perspective, this is new. So it's new to the member states, it's new to patient organisations, clinical organisations, and particularly it's new to technology developers. And we're all learning. We've got to maintain this is a learning environment, and things will change over time and will have to change over time, and some things will be good. One of the key things, and this might come back to resourcing, and I might have a slightly different perspective here, but we're facing a huge amount of extra resourcing and analyses that we're having to create for that. To put that into perspective, we think that a more simple JCA is looking at around 2,000 pages on that. That can go to many thousands of pages for some more complex JCAs. So that's the size of the submissions that from a developer perspective we're having to do. And I also sympathise on the assessor side, that is a vast amount of information to handle. And so there's going to be a lot of learnings there. There's a question around, is more data good? Probably not. There's a diminishing marginal return on that. Let's have a look at where can we streamline to what actual decision makers are going to need. Because as we've heard from Alexander, there are a lot of developers that are submitting for the first time. They are small companies. Not only is it the first time they're submitting to the JCA, they may have no prior experience of HTA itself, and they are faced with this. And that's going to take time. It's going to take capability build for developers, as it is with the member states from a HTA perspective. You should also remember that this was meant to reduce duplication, increase efficiency in there. So we need to keep that in mind. If it's not doing that for all the stakeholders, do we need to re-examine? For those of us that are experienced at launching in Europe and having dealt with multiple HTA bodies within Europe and globally as well, this is still the first time for us. We're often seeing where we would do a lot of the German analyses would be with our German affiliates. That is now going up into European or global levels. So there's a learning curve that will go on there. And actually, it's far bigger than we would ever have produced. The number of analyses that we got is a lot bigger than we would typically have delivered in Europe throughout. So, but it's new. Let's keep that in mind. There's been some success. There's been some real positives as well. I'm a glass half full sort of person. So, eligibility criteria, we've had Q&A documents. I can say from first-hand experience, we email the Secretariat if it's around eligibility, we get a really timely response. That's a real positive and starts to help build up that predictability. We're also seeing changes with learnings as well. The start of the procedure, what was happening, we're beginning to see consistency now in how the developers informed, putting out the timelines there. We're seeing and we're hearing changes with the scope and explanation meeting from what it was to, okay, let's try something new that may be more impactful. And the Q&A documents that have been mentioned, really positive to do that. And we certainly appreciate that and encourage that and want to partner more with that. We've also seen discussions around, there's a parallel process with the EMA around redaction of documents. There's the potential there that we're all duplicating effort. But actually, no, let's stop the duplication. Let's try and align where it's appropriate to do so, do that and reduce the amount of effort, both from an assessor perspective and the developer one. And we are sharing, as developers, Where we're allowed to, from a competition law perspective, we are sharing experiences as much as we can on that. And, you know, I've been doing that today and other industry colleagues who are going through this. But there is uncertainty, or it may be variability, one of the other there. So we've heard from some national HTA bodies around penalties for incomplete submissions. That sort of suggests it's all the developer's fault. But there's an interpretation of the guidance that may not be clear in certain places. I can sit in my company and 5 people look at the same page of a methods guidance and we're concluding different things. This is part of a learning system, but it's around how do we bring that together so that we improve for the good of everybody there. There's questions around what's a confirmation check versus what's pre-assessment. Hopefully over time, again in a learning thing, we'll begin to understand that. But we've had some requests at confirmation stage, which actually is a reanalysis. And that's an assessment issue rather than necessarily a confirmation check around the completeness. The type of requests that we're getting from assessors and at the confirmation is varied. So again, what are the themes that we're going? And that will depend on the experience of the developer and where they are in terms of completeness of that dossier itself. And there's also an issue around how do we interpret the requests. We've got some requests at the moment, others have had similar, where we sat there thinking, does it mean this or does it mean that? One of the positives is we can send back into the IT system and get clarity on that. But actually, how that's worded is really important to us because it helps us deliver much more efficiently what's being asked around that. We've got some variability or uncertainty, but we've only got an N of 1, 2 or 3 at the moment around when that draft report timing might come through and do the test. As I've said, is this really reducing and increasing efficiency, or is it increasing resource? It's increasing resource for developers significantly, and for small developers that could become a really significant barrier to entering into Europe, given that we still need to go to 27 member states. And then finally, member state usage. But let's be positive. There's pragmatism. We need to remain pragmatic. We need to be in a continuous learning. We need to adapt and do that. That can be done through Q&A documents. We've got process and methods guides on that. One of the bits that may help with understanding where there's differences, let's not always have to go through an IT platform. Sometimes a virtual meeting for 15, 20 minutes with the assessors, say, what do you really mean by that? Could be really helpful just to clear and much more efficient given the turnaround times we've got. Let's talk about stakeholder discussions. What can we co-develop together, build together, where there's a difference of opinion on that, or difference of interpretation. And most importantly, and this is the big unknown at the moment, what does this mean in sort of uptake, usage, process at the member state level? We're hoping a significant reduction in any requests and no requests potentially on the clinical evidence. There you have it. Move to the clinical added value part. Let's move on to the economics there. And let's not forget, and Anna, you sort of mentioned today around orphan medicines, we're getting those through. Yes, but in 2028, it's also a different type of orphan medicine. At the moment, that's been related to oncology, where we know the type of outcomes, we may know the type of tumour area. We're moving to potentially ultra-rare disease. And that's very, very different there. And the regulation's calling out about issues around orphan medicines, vaccines and ATMPs. We're seeing some of the method guidance is a little contradictory to that single-arm trials are always insufficient, but actually we've got indirect comparison techniques. We need an RCT, but the RCT may not always be gold standard when it comes to an ultra-rare disease in very young paediatric patients who have no other option and a life expectancy of 6 months. So let's be a little bit more pragmatic and think through those implications for the future. And then metrics, We can measure process things, but let's not forget what the objective of the regulation really is. It's about facilitating patient access. It's about improving health outcomes. We want meaningful national usage. If it's not having meaningful, impactful usage, why have we introduced it? It's an extra burden for patients, clinicians, assessors, national HTA bodies, developers. It's an extra cost to everybody in the system. Let's also look at what data is actually being used. 70% of the data in Germany that is provided, it's a huge thing, analysis has shown is not actually used in the decision making. But we've implemented potentially a similar system at European. So let's recognise that and see where it goes. And then finally, we need capacity, we need timely delivery from developers and from the assessor side. But let's get efficient and predictable for all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So you mentioned, I mean, you were very, very clear in what is happening currently and what should be improved in the near future. I mean, so it's new for everybody, and this is echoing everybody mentioned, every stakeholder mentioned this. Success is, I would say that the main point is reduce duplication and accelerate access. Uncertainty is not only about time, but it is essentially about content and workload for the industry, building together through pragmatism and trying to anticipate as much as possible what is going to then happen with the JCA submission in the member states and the metrics. Again, facilitate and accelerate access. Those are the key metrics to consider.